TVA website. There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. So I'm going to take some time to talk to you about stuff that I've been doing for virtually my entire career, dealing with security online. So cybersecurity as opposed to physical security, even though there's a little bit of information in here about physical security, and there's a specific purpose for that. So for those of you, I think everybody online knows me, Cheryl Carmel. I've been in cybersecurity for about 20 years and technology for a bunch more over on top of that. And tonight here, I'm going to be teaching about the who, the how, and the why of cybercrime and what you can do to stay as safe as possible online. My disclaimer will be out there that there's really no way to be 100% secure online. Anybody that says, well, I don't really have an online presence, like I remember my father-in-law at 94, whatever it was, he's insisted he didn't have an online presence, and I was able to prove to him he did, because if you have a bank account, if you have a social security number, if you have a medical card, your information is online if you're out there accessing that account or not. So you just need to be prepared for whatever is out there. So here's what we're going to try to do, walk through this and see what we've got. So this common sense approach to protect you and your data. All right, let's see. Well, it was just working, I promise. Well, let's go over here to, hang on one second. Okay, there we go. So I'll see if my mouse starts working again here. So our agenda, we've got 5 big topics that are there. So we'll go through a glossary because we know that cybersecurity folks have very unique language that we use. We like to use a lot of code words and things like that. So we'll go through a very short glossary. And I know that there's going to be some other language peppered throughout the presentation. So if there's something comes up and you don't know what it is, just ask and I'll try to explain as much as I can. We'll also talk about threat vectors and methods. These are the people or whatever who do the attacks and kind of how they do the attacks, type of attacks. I'm going to get into the business model behind cybercrime. Cybercrime as a service, it's a real thing, so you'll be interested to hear some of that. And then some of the things to look for, and then we'll get into that common sense plan. Try one more time to see if there we go. All right, so our glossary. First thing we're going to hit is data types. I think everybody at this point has heard the term PI or PII. So personal information, personally identifiable information. There's also healthcare information. So what we've got here is a list on one side that says standard personal data. This is everything from anything about you, anything that will enable a person to identify you as an individual person. So your name, your address, your date of birth, stuff like this. Government IDs, so security numbers, driver's license numbers, passport numbers. Your personal life, your living and social habits, marital status, all this kind of information. Your personal life or professional life, education, career, your resume, salary, wage information, awards, certifications, all of that is personal data. Your online data, your IP address, web cookies, event logs, audit files. You have all that, even if you don't know you have it. And I'll tell you more about that in a few seconds here. Your health records, medical, your financial, obviously you got all your banking stuff, location data, your GPS settings, all your travel information, your frequent flyer. So think about all of that as your standard personal data. On the other side, we have what I call sensitive categories of data. And I shouldn't say I call it there because that's something that some of the privacy laws have labeled this type of data. And if we look at that, it's anything that can cause additional harm. So this is your political opinions, which right now talk about additional harm. That's kind of a big thing at this point. Racial or ethnic groups, religion or religious beliefs. That's one of the reasons why it's important for this audience, for our staff and leadership team and our congregation to really realize that just being Jewish makes us a specific target to cyber criminals. So keep that in mind. You'll see other things there, philosophical beliefs, your membership data, whether you're on a trade union or a member of a gun club or a health club, whatever, anything genetic or biometrics, your sexual orientation, sexuality, and anything with your criminal offenses are there. So all of these are data types that we have to think about. And as you're thinking about those data types and those categories, also think about the accounts where you have this information stored, either on your system or online someplace. Okay? Yes, ma'am. So you want to talk over here or do you want me to repeat that? Yeah. Yeah. It's all there. So what Cindy is saying is she looked herself up. Did you Google yourself? Oh, yeah. Yep. Google yourself and you'll be surprised what you see. And all of those databases that are out there, they collect information from different places. So every time you go to a website and you may see that pop up that says we collect cookies or whatever, or just visiting the website, the way browsers work, they're gathering that information on you. Google is notorious about gathering additional information. Okay, let's go to the other side of the coin here. So device types, we talked about data types, this is device types. Any device that's connected to the internet is what we need to think about. Okay, how much is that? Obviously, laptops, cell phones, tablets, video cameras. We have our cameras up here. We have our printer. It's connected to the internet because it's connected through the network, right? You have your video surveillance, your baby cameras, your wearables, your car, all those medical devices, all of these type of things. Now let's go into storage. We have things stored on our laptops, our cell phones, our tablets. We store things in the cloud, whether you do like OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox or Box or all of these other places. So those are considered devices because they're storage devices, USB drives. All of those things are connected. So keep all of that in mind, because what we're trying to do here is build a digital footprint of what your life is. Okay? Now, let's get into threats. A threat agent or actor, whatever, this is the person behind the action. Two types of people here is we'll see a threat agent could be external. So when I think of internal for our purposes here, the internal side is our staff and leadership team and our congregation. We're the internal folks within this picture that's here. And as I say, it's the second bullet down that's there is the internal. It could be somebody that's malicious that is upset. And when I say malicious employee unhappy with the company, you see those in other companies, not within TBA, I'm sure. But it could be malicious. It could be a person who just makes an accident, makes a mistake, has an accident in the way that they handle data. So it's usually not malicious all the time, but it could be. A threat agent could be external. These are what we think of most of the time as the cyber criminals. These are the evil guys that are really out there trying to steal our data or do other harm to us. Okay, so that's the who is doing this action that's there. The threat vector, and in the industry, we call it the tactics, techniques, and procedures, the TTPs, basically the tools. How do they do what they do? Three major areas of those tools: malware, which we'll go into, social engineering, which we'll go into, and physical environment, which we'll do a little bit on. Okay, so this is who is doing this and how are they doing it. Okay, the next area, vulnerability. Okay, big word that's there. Vulnerability that we think of within the cyber world is it's a flaw or weakness in an application or a device that can be exploited. So something was miscoded, misconfigured, or whatever. So the second one there is talking about a configuration error in the application. So these are the things that we don't have a lot of control over unless we're talking about the configuration of your privacy settings and your security settings in your browser and your social media. But most of this is software that comes from another company that we download on our phones or on our PCs to do whatever action we're going to do. The other area of vulnerability, and the biggest area, is people, the human factor. It's us. Okay, so when we think about vulnerability in humans, then we go back and think through who is the most vulnerable. So there was a recent study that was done to say, let's find out who. Is it the elderly because they haven't had that much experience? Is it the youth because they have, everybody is ubiquitously using some kind of a device? So who is it? And it was really neither. What they found is it was spread evenly amongst people who were at some kind of a compromised emotional state. So again, reading some stuff on Brene Brown. I don't know if you guys all know who she is, but she does some great speeches and has some great books talking about vulnerability and shame. So she defines vulnerability as the emotion we have during times of uncertainty and risk. What's more uncertain or risky than COVID, war in Ukraine, and our political scenes right now? So that puts us all in kind of this heightened emotional state that makes us more vulnerable to these attacks that we're seeing coming in. All right. All right. Go next to preventative countermeasures. So what can you do to prevent that in a very simple form that's there? Because the rest of this presentation is going to talk a lot about that. So a countermeasure is any action we do to prevent that vulnerability from being exploited. So when a software update comes, we get those on the phone all the time, get an update that's coming. That's something that, and if there's security bugs that they're fixing, that's one of the big things we can do to kind of prevent some of this stuff. Configuration changes, when like Google just recently announced a lot of changes that they've done to their security and privacy settings. And it looks really good on paper. It's not really so good underneath this, but still, it's something that's out there that we can do to make some changes to our settings to make us, less vulnerable overall. And then another countermeasure is what we're doing here tonight. This is the security awareness training. So the more you can learn about things that you can do and how to change your behavior online, the better you can be overall. All right. Okay, so we're going to get into impacts. And I'm going to use a specific example because I think a lot of us here, I think everybody here and a lot of the people online are aware of the TVA email issue that we had back in, I think it was November. All right, so as I'm thinking about that situation that's there, so there was an email that was sent from our bookkeeper's email to the congregation. So it was an event, as I'm looking at the definitions here, it was an event that the email was sent. We turned it into an incident when we realized that the bookkeeper's email was compromised and somebody changed settings within her email. The breach is kind of looking at that situation that's there, and then we get into two pieces of this. So a breach of security is when somebody breaks into the device, they get that unauthorized access to that system. The breach of privacy happens when they get access to data. So this person, we presume, got access to all the contacts in her email address. So that's some of the things we're looking at. And generally speaking, breaches of security could result in ransom demands. So they break into your system or a corporate system, and they start making ransom demands. Breaches of the privacy could result in identity theft. All right. Now, cyber attacks. This is any attempt by a cyber criminal to attack your computing network for the purpose of altering, stealing, destroying, or exposing your data. Uh-oh, Cindy dropped something. Cyber attacks target people using the malware, social engineering, the physical attacks that we talked about briefly. And their key is to steal personal data, sensitive data, intellectual property. The net result is they're trying to do something to embarrass a company, make a public statement about something as far as like a political nation state type of thing, or the biggest thing is they want to make money some way or another. Okay, oops. Yeah, and okay, so the last part of this there is, so basically that's why they do everything that they're doing. And your job from here is to think about the probability that a threat actor will be able to deploy a threat vector to exploit a vulnerability on an app or device that you have that has weak or no preventative countermeasures, and what the possibility of that impact will have on you. So that's where we're here. Okay, so our threat vectors that are here. The three big categories: social engineering, malware, and physical security. And malware, and you guys remember the commercial, is it malware or malware? So malicious software is what that stands for. General term to describe any software that's designed to disrupt, damage, gain unauthorized access to a computing system or your data. And there's many different types of threats that come out of that. Common types of malware, there's quite a few of them on this list. We're going to go through a couple of them in more detail, but just to kind of look at them at high level. Adware, you get ads all over the place. Not really that big of a deal until they are actually malicious and not from the real company. And one of those things, going back to the emotional, is you'll see an ad that is very sensationalized, that it's working to really get you to click on it for some reason or another. So it's, there was one I saw this past week, a woman opens her eyes in the middle of her own funeral. Who wouldn't want to click on that to find out what the heck's going on? But why, right? What's the purpose behind that? Is it an actual ad or an article, or is it malware behind that? I'm going to float down to what spyware. Dark Hotel, I told you there's a lot of code names. Dark Hotel was a group that created a fake hotel Wi-Fi during a business conference and stole confidential information from all the attendees at the conference. So we'll talk a little bit about fake Wi-Fi access points later on as well. Viruses, and virus is kind of like a common term that's out of that. It's any evil code that's out there to do harm. And this is way back in the year 2000, the I love you virus. That one, even in that date, cost $15 billion worldwide to remediate. And then worms, it's kind of like a virus that goes throughout the entire network. We'll talk about Stuxnet, which is one of the real world examples that it gives here, and some of the depth behind how that worked. Okay, so botnets. This is not something that we are going to be seeing on a regular basis, but what a botnet is it's an infection that gets onto your system. Usually you will not know it's there. And whenever the person who is putting it there wants to activate it to do the evil that it wants to do, and it's generally what's called a DDoS, which is a denial of service type of an attack, then it will light up, and then all of a sudden it's stealing your resources that are on your PC. So that's processing power. Now, so you don't know what's there, and then all of a sudden you're a part of this attack and you don't know it. So you could be a part of a DDoS attack, you could be a part of a ransomware attack. And so those are some of the things to be aware of. One example that they gave is called EchoBot. And it's a variant of another one that was years earlier that I'll talk about a little bit later. The interesting thing here is it used 2.5 million IoT devices. Now, do you guys know what IoT is? Internet of Things. Whenever we're talking about all of these different applications, like you've got your watch, you've got your camera, you've got your modems, your refrigerator, your baby monitors. All of these are things that are attached to the internet. So IoT, just think very broadly of anything that has a processor, regardless of how minute you might think about it. Anyway, so this bot used things like that, your baby monitor, gaming devices, your refrigerator, to launch this attack. That's pretty hefty to think about. Mobile malware, just to really institute that anything that has a processor, smartphone, tablets, so on and so forth, can be an attack surface. It's not just your PC, not just your laptop or your desktop. Anything that has that. So your phone can get a virus, your watch can get a virus, so on and so forth. Ransomware, we'll spend a little bit of time here in ransomware because this is what I consider the evil of all evils. When ransomware first came out about 15 years ago, I didn't really go back and look that up, but it's been around for about 15 years. It was a very, quote, simple process that it would go out, use a simple encryption algorithm, encrypt all the files on your disk. You want those files back, you pay a ransom to get it back. Pretty simple that way. Well, when people started realizing how this was working and they would not pay the ransom, what the ransomware folks started doing is making some changes to their TTPs, their tools. So they changed it to where they could, instead of just asking for a ransom to decrypt your files, if you didn't, they would start releasing your files or releasing the fact that they did this. So they would do a couple of different things with this. They would offer actual discounts if you paid early, or they would start multiplying if you paid late. And if you didn't pay at all, then they would go public with the information that they broke into your systems and stole your information, or they would just start selling it on the dark web. So some pretty evil stuff. One of the teams here, whatever, the group cyber crime groups created this thing called, what was it, Ryuk, I think is how you say this. This was created by a Russian group called Wizard Spider. They are a ransomware team, and they also have what's called ransomware as a service. When we get into the business model, we'll talk about that. And what they've done is they are like one of the top groups. So their ransoms go up to like 12.5 million. So out of the top 10 ransoms that have happened, they are the top 3 that have been released. And again, understanding all the motivations behind how they make the money, that's a lot of money to make with just one simple file that's there. Let's see, what was the one that they recently did? So when they released one, they spoofed an email address. They have an Outlook document that had the file in it, the artwork file attached in it, And when that came out, it was a Trojan that downloaded and then started propagating throughout the system. And what makes this one specific, it was the first ransomware that was able to not only encrypt the files on your direct disk, they started going into your network drives and into your cloud storage. So they could propagate and get everything that you have. So if you say, I'm fine, I've got a cloud backup, not anymore. This is a type of tool that goes and bypasses that. Okay. All right, the next grouping, social engineering. This is just basically preying on people's emotion or actions to get them to take an action that they would not normally do. So they'll trick a person into divulging information or taking money out and giving it to them. So they do all kinds of tricks, and we'll go through quite a few of those. So common social engineering types. Again, we'll go through some of these a little bit more details, but baiting, you've seen it. Something pops up on your screen, you've won a $100 gift certificate. Click here. That's baiting. Diversion is tricking a person to deliver information to the wrong place. Honey trap, you may have heard it called catfishing or date fraud. So tricking somebody into a romantic relationship where you'll never meet them. You'll just do all of this online. And then they start asking for money. So I recently had one of my sister's friends was smack in the middle of one of these, and it took quite a bit of information that between myself and a few others were able to help dig up that finally convinced her that, yeah, this is a problem. So Sharon just mentioned that somebody went through this thing, and yeah, so they were caught in the middle. So, and then the one on the bottom is called Watering Hole. This is also drive-by. So this is a legitimate website. Again, something like our TBA website could potentially be compromised, where somebody would put something on the site, well, we wouldn't know it, and somebody would just simply go visit our site, and they get infected by that. So this kind of things happen. So some of the other details there are phishing. You think of phishing as just phishing. So there are several different types of phishing, which we'll go through. But this very basically is the fraudulent practice of sending messages in order to launch the attack, right? So whatever message. They generally accomplish with a spoofed email address, which basically is taking an email address and putting your name in it, and it's somebody else sending it. So it basically is a scam way to get the information out there. So you can pretend that you're somebody else in that direction. And it's deployed by any type of method, not just email, which most people think of. All right, so what types of phish do we have? Angular is one that's used to spoof customer service accounts. So it looks like it's from, oh shoot, what is our temple website? ShoreCloud. Yeah. Shareware, yeah. So it can be customer service looking like that. So things like that. Another one is what I call bulk. This is the indiscriminate commodity, just spamming everybody at one time to see where something hits. And when something hits, that's when they start focusing on it. That's something that is usually targeted at a specific business or our organization. It could be like our religious organization. I go back to what happened with the email back in November. I think it could have been something that they were just spamming to see what they can get. And then maybe they'll see what hits, and then from there, leverage an attack later. So we just need to make sure we're very well aware of that. Smishing and vishing, you'll see that down there too. Smishing is SMS, so using texting as the main communicator. Vishing is using your voice messages as your communicator. Okay, love these words, don't you, right? And then we have spear phishing. This is a targeted attack to selected people or roles within an organization. So one of the other examples we'll see later on where there's a target attack toward, well, actually with the bookkeeper, that was a targeted attack toward the financial organization. Another one toward our president and our rabbi. And then whaling is targeting the high value assets. So the CEO of a company or our rabbi, which he's been whaled before, several times actually. Okay. Oh, and actually the most, go back over here real quickly. There are some organizations that are used to spoof more than others, like Amazon, Amazon customer service, think about that, Apple, Microsoft, Bank of America and Wells Fargo, Social Security Administration and the IRS. Those are the companies that are considered the highest impersonated accounts, spoofed accounts. So watch out for those. Pretexting. So we've heard this term kind of a lot recently with the war in Ukraine, but pretexting is pretending to be someone that you're not, whereas in the war, it's pretending that somebody else is doing the attack than is. So the attacker will create some kind of a fraudulent scenario to gain your trust and to launch the attack. And they're really very good at convincing you of what's going on. IRS auditor is one of them. Kidnapping your grandchild is another one. There was a friend of mine that she had a home-based business that did freeze-dried fish. So there was a lot of electricity going through her house. She got a phone call from the electric company claiming that she was behind on her bill and that she needed to go grab gift cards to pay up on her bill. So these are some of the pretexting type of things. They were so convincing, and this is a woman who had been through my security training a lot, and she said they started down the path and started collecting this, and when they was getting ready to do the drop-off, then she started going, wait, what would Cheryl do at this moment? So thinking through some of the issues that were there is like, this is somebody who's been through training, she's understanding what it is, and she still got caught up because she got caught up in the emotional of the, if they turn off my electricity, I'm gonna lose my livelihood. So it was pretty convincing the way they went through it. Another one that's very convincing as well is Scareware. These are pop-up windows with an urgent message. You'll see something that says, you have a virus. You need to update your system immediately. Call this number to expedite the fix. You call the number and they say, all right, here's what you need to do. Go to this website, download this file, and then you just downloaded the real malware. Another one of these messages here is, I just heard this probably about a week or so ago on one of the podcasts I listened to called Hacking the Human. There was a teacher who had been teaching for easily 30 years, she said, got home from teaching one day, and there was one of those messages that was very similar to what you're seeing here. She called the number, and they went about telling her that, yes, we've seen a lot of porn on your PC, so you really need to take care of this now. And they walked her through the process of downloading an application so that she can transfer money to that site so that they can take care of it. This is a teacher, so we're not talking about dumb people here. We're talking about people who are just really caught up in that moment. So that's what I'm saying about social engineering is these folks are very clever, they're very deceiving, and they'll do anything to get money from you, right? Okay, enough on that part. Physical vectors real quickly. ATM skimmers or regular skimmers on gas pumps, whatever. You've seen these. Anytime that there is a credit card kiosk, those can easily be skimmed with a device that puts over them. So there's nothing you can do really to see that. Always look at it and see, and you can pull them in different things, but yeah, exactly. So you pull on them and whatever. If it's an outside vendor, it's very hard to do that. But that is a real thing. Dumpster diving. This is very age old. Is if you don't shred the stuff that comes in with your personal information, there are people who will go through your trash to find it. Porch pirates. Seen a lot of this lately. So somebody will follow a delivery truck or the mail truck and steal whatever's on the porch from whatever. Tailgating, piggybacking, walking in a building without you personally badging in. We've got our badging system here where you had to badge in, but do you ever badge in and let somebody else in right behind you? So that's something to think about to make sure we know who's doing what. This last one here, the USB drop. So just keep that one in mind for one of the other stories that's coming up. But that's basically taking a USB stick that has stuff on it, dropping in a parking lot, some other place, and then somebody's going to pick that up thinking, ooh, I just got something for free. And they'll go home, put it in their system, and then do something from there. And you'll see where that really was a major player in one of the attacks that happened. Okay, so that's all of the vectors, that's all the tools. Now we're going to get into some of the actual attacks that have happened. The types of attacks. Okay, common attacks. This list isn't exhaustive, so you'll see APT, another one of our acronyms. We'll go into that one in a little bit more detail. Bluetooth, clickjacking. So the ones we won't go into detail, cryptojacking, basically that's using kind of like a bot that gets into your system and uses your system to mine crypto coins. DNS tunneling there and OWASP.10, those are both technical stuff that's beyond our conversation here, but just know that it's all part of the things in the background that happen so that the cyber criminals can do what they need to do. And we won't go into the details of a 0-day, but we'll go into the details of a 0-day that you guys all probably were a part of. Okay, advanced persistent threat. All right, a threat agent gains access to a computer network and they stay in stealth mode. They do whatever they can to not be detected for as long as possible. Because while they're in the system, they're gathering information, they're propagating about the network, whatever. And this is typically at a nation state or state-sponsored type of event. So it's not something that we think about very much, but here's why it's kind of important for us to realize. Is I did mention Stuxnet a few minutes ago. This is a malware, actually, or a program, started back around 2009. Actually, US and Israel intelligence community collaborated together to create this piece of software. The intent of this, it was explicitly created to cause harm to Iran's nuclear program, which it did, and it did very well. They stacked several vectors together in this application. They put it on a USB stick, and they dropped it in the parking lot of a nuclear power plant in Iran. Okay, so now let's go into this other part of this, saying that what this was is it was a program that once it was on the system, it went through the environment, a worm, looking for a very specific target. So these PLC units, which are programmatic logic control units that are specifically designed to separate nuclear matters. And that's well beyond my capacity, but that's kind of what it was doing. So it was looking for that specific machine. So none of the other machines it touched. And when it found those, it would do whatever it needed to do to break the machine so it couldn't do its job. Basically, it shut down the nuclear program for Iran. So pretty clever that way. So what makes it unique there with a USB part is plants like this, critical infrastructure, are usually what's called air-gapped. So inside that building, they have all the connection that they need, but there's no internet connection outside. So how they passed that air gap was that little USB stick that was stuck into a computer by one person. So now, they figured that out years ago, and it again, they still haven't completely recovered from that, but Iran does still have some nuclear powers there. It took them about 18 months, so that's the advanced persistent part of that. It took them about 18 months to really find and figure out what was going on and stopping that from spreading to other power plants. But it did eventually get out into what's called the wild, so it's being spread into other areas, into other countries that it wasn't initially intended. Then I'll ask this question here, because it was created by US and Israel for a very specific purpose to hurt someone who's been doing harm to others. Is this valid warfare or is this malware? Something to think about, especially in light of Colonial Pipeline. So think about that one there. Okay, Bluetooth based. Actually, I heard an news article today on this. The one I wanted to call out specifically, these are the little air tags that you can get from Apple or whatever, put on your key ring. So if you lose your keys, you can go look at your phone. Where do I put my keys? Well, these are being used to stalk people. So Bluetooth stalking is what it's called. So that's dropping an air tag into someone's purse, someone's laptop bag, attaching it to somebody's car. And that's what happened. There was a couple that was vacationing in Disney World, I believe it was. Again, just heard this on the news today. And somebody had been stalking them. So just be very careful. Say that again. I think it was a casino. So yeah, Cindy was saying it happened here locally, and I think it was somebody from a casino that was being followed and tracked home. So yes, it's real, it's local, and it happens. Okay, this is one that when I first saw it, scared the bejesus out of me. This is another form of clickjacking, which there's a couple different ways that this is done. And if we can all look at this, and I know you guys online can't see it, but man, can I get it over here? Is it doing? You see, you can barely see it, but you guys see that. It's a hair, and that's a speck of dust, but not real. So what you see, hopefully you guys can see it on the screen, it's there, is the threat actors will program using something like JavaScript to create what looks to be like a hair, a smudge, speck of dust. And what do we do? And what action is that? You're clicking when you're trying to wipe the dust off, right? So these guys are tricky. This is what they're trying to do. All right, real quick on the distributed denial of service or denial of service. This is an attack that floods the network with false requests in order to disrupt business. So they're not after money, usually they're just after some kind of name recognition or making a point to somebody like Google, because in 2017, Google got hit with this by China, and it really took about a 6-month time frame that they were being hit off and on. I mentioned earlier about the Internet of Things with the 2.5 million. Well, it started with another, the earlier variant, the Mariah variant, and it hit, what was so unique, it hit a security researcher and blogger, a guy named Brian Krebs, hit his website, which again was not big news for everybody else, but in the security industry, if you're a security person and you get hit with one of these, it tends to make the news. So there's only 600,000 IoT devices that hit his website to make his website go down. So again, going back to, you don't know when these things are on your system, and you could be part of these attacks without realizing it. This is another fun one. You see where the arrows go? So what looks like a G, so cigar page on the top, and down below, cigar page. So it's basically using lookalike characters from a different language in order to create a fake domain. So one has the G with a little curve at the bottom, and the other one is G with a straight line. So how much do you pay attention whenever you go to a website? It's one thing if you type it in, but if you're doing a search and you just simply click on something and it comes up, pay attention to what you're looking at on the screen. Okay. All right, Internet of Things, gone through this a couple of times now that we kind of know what it is. I call it the refrigerator attack, right? So you think, especially for a refrigerator, what harm is this going to do? It could spoil your food, but if you have any medicine that's stored in the refrigerator, it can ruin your medication. So that's one thing to think about. Your cars, there's been several examples where cars have been turned off while you're driving on the highway, 80 miles an hour. So you now have no power steering, you really don't have any brakes, whatever. It can be very dangerous. And then back in 2013, CNN actually reported that Dick Cheney had his pacemaker modified so that nobody could hack into his wireless. I think they actually turned off the wireless access to that. So these are all things to think about with all the devices that we have connected to the internet somewhere. All right, password base. So this, again, another thing to think about is, what was it, Yahoo breach years ago? It was only 3 million records, but in that Yahoo breach, they got usernames and your passwords. Passwords may have been hashed, some of them were in plain text, but they may have been hashed, but still, when you get that information, you could do different techniques with it. So that first one is password mining. That's exactly what the people are doing. They're out looking for wherever they can get to usernames and passwords just to grab that information. And then they do different techniques. I list here credential stuffing. This is an automated method where the attacker uses the credentials that were previously found in other attacks, and they just try as much as they can. And they use programs to do this, so they can do thousands of attacks per minute. The brute force, very similar. This is sending many passwords. So there's databases of stolen passwords. So they can take these databases and just ship them off to wherever, just to try whatever they can to brute force into a system. So anytime you use the same password multiple places, keep this in mind, because if you use it in, I heard somebody say one time, yeah, I take all my financial stuff, I use one password for all my financial stuff. Great. So now all the person needs to do is that one password, and they have access to all your banking accounts. So anytime you use the same password multiple times, be aware. All right, I said we're going to be talking about a 0-day that affected everybody. Has anybody heard of Log4j? Okay, it made the news. I know it was on CNN. I know it was on the national news, like the morning shows and things like this. It's back in December. Mid-December, December 14th is when the attacks started. There's only like 100 per day when it first started. By December 16th, there were so many of them. That's when CNN started really breaking the news. It's a very simple, it's called open source tool, written with Java, and it's in virtually everything that is online. So they said this is something that affects the internet. And it was remote code execution. So basically the person who found this vulnerability in this very commonly used piece of software was able to log into anything that had this piece of software, this log4j on it, and they could add their code, they can access your system, they could do anything they wanted. That's the reason why it was like so widely talked about. And the applications using this include Apple iCloud, AWS, and well, AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, which almost, I mean, just thousands and thousands of websites sit on AWS. So if your access to any of those sites that are on AWS, you could have been impacted. Most password managers, most antivirus software, most security tools were impacted by this, which is again, very unique. Shopify, so not just like Amazon shopping, but Shopify is one of those applications that's used in many, many, many of the online shopping applications you use. And then lots of games such as Minecraft. So all of those applications were impacted. Now, what happens whenever you have a 0 day? So a 0 day is where a security cyber attack finds a vulnerability that's not been previously known, and they will do anything they can to exploit it before it's recognized by anybody else. Well, it didn't take long for this to be patched, but so folks like Apple iCloud, AWS, all of those guys patch very quickly, but think about those gaming consoles that you have. How often is software there updated? So these things are still vulnerable to this kind of attack. Now, real quickly, cybercrime as a service. Very simple. There's a very direct business model. They've got management, they've got a staffing, they've got product and services, sales and marketing groups, infrastructure team, their development team, and customer service team. Customer service team is needed because how many people know how to use Bitcoins years ago, right? So you call the customer service team, they'll walk you through it so that they can get their money. So it's a very specific business model. And then the image below there is talking about how they go about launching the attacks. They talk about the campaign, the infection, the staging, the scanning, all the different steps they go through. So this is a well thought out business. Here's a recruiting. This is off of an actual social media website for Lapsus, which is one of the ones recently that's been coming about doing a lot of recruiting for their ransomware attacks. So they're looking for anybody that has very specific credentials into different telcos. So it's real. They have a commercial model, very straightforward. They market their goods. I've got 3 billion user IDs and password combinations for sale here on the dark web, $25 per record. So they sell it on the dark web. Organized crime model, those are the ones that are after the big games. The outsourcing model, I've got my outsource here where I've got an infrastructure, I've got a ransomware as a service loaded here. You just tell me what you want and I'll set you up with what you need. And then mentor apprentice model. This is where I would take you in and show you how to do the different things you need to do. So different business models out there for this. And not everybody's heard of the as a service, like infrastructure as a service, software as a service. A lot of us have, but there are different as a service models. Fraud as a service, basically you can focus on the banking industry. You can buy what you need to launch a fraud attack. The malware as a service. I don't know how to write malware, so I just want to go buy one of these tools that are out there. Ransomware as a service. I'll give you some examples in a few minutes of an actual ransomware as a service attack that I was a part of. And then attacks as a service. Again, I don't know how to launch these attacks, so I'm going to go pay you X amount so that you can do this for me, and then I get the ransom out of that, whatever's going to happen. Okay. Why do they do it? Because there's money to it. The interesting thing is Social Security numbers, which is the last item here, used to be the one that would give you the most, less worth than $1 now. Whereas if you get different types of like a PayPal account, whatever, and the Stripe accounts, those can yield you $1,000 per account type. So just different models that are there. And then let's look at some of the high profile breaches that are out there. I think several of these we've heard about. Equifax, 2017, 140 million personal records, which was basically all of our credit history. It included social security numbers as well. Yahoo, a measly little 300 billion records. LinkedIn, 700 million. But I'm focusing in on that one, the CAM4. In 2020, they lost 10.88 billion records. This one was very egregious because they got the email addresses, the names, sexual orientation, chat transcripts, email correspondence, password hashes, IP addresses, and payment logs. This specific site is a streaming platform for adult entertainment. So it was very harmful to those people who were involved in that. So, and that's one of the things that people look for. Okay, what to look for? So we did print here a flyer, which I was hoping to have it in the, now we can't do it right now. So I will get this emailed out to everybody that's online there, but basically social engineering red flags. We'll go through them at a very high level. Things to think about. So am I expecting this email? Is it from somebody I know? Am I being asked to do something like disclose personal information or send money or cryptocurrency? Are the links in the message inconsistent with the content of the message or otherwise suspicious? Am I being threatened in any way? Being asked to do something immediately, urgently, and not tell anybody about it? Am I being offered something that seems to be too good to be true? Or is it email from a governmental agency? So those are all like red flags, and the red flag document gives a little bit more detail that's there. And the bottom line is, does the email just feel evil? So I want you to learn to trust your doubt. So if you have any reason whatsoever to doubt, trust your doubt. All right, let's go through a few examples, and starting with a TBA specific example. So we know that the TBA bookkeeper's email was compromised. A message was sent from what appeared to be her email to the congregants that were in her contact list. And we'll look at that in just a second. Another example is an email that was directed to our TBA president from our rabbi, asking him to do something. And then we'll look at the actual email that our TBA leadership team sent out to warn congregants. All right, this is the first one that's there. So, and it seems like my laser pointer's not working very well, but look at the subject line, new multiple files from our bookkeeper financial administration. That would be a unique, unusual, and non-expected subject line for what she would normally send out. Now her signature line looks pretty normal. Again, I didn't look at it in very detail. There could be something in there, but they could have lifted that. And again, since I think that they used her actual email to launch this, and Ira can give us details on that maybe. So they just got her regular signature. But the e-fax is something that's not normal for us. Yeah. The phone number? Oh, no, you're right. So the 610-337, 7622, that's not correct. The extension, yeah. So things like that. So Cindy, that's very good. So Cindy pointed out this phone number is not correct. So things to look at there. We don't use e-fax. Priority, very important. So what files could we be getting from our bookkeeper that were very important? And then click on the link to preview the PDF files. So there's a lot of things that are suspicious about this. However, and I remember this during a Friday night service, there was most of the people who received it clicked on the link. All right, so we had the events that this email was sent. It was a security breach that somebody got into her email account, but until you clicked on it, and you could have been a victim of some kind of a malware at that point. So several things that happened with that. This next one, and if you look at the from, okay, that makes it pretty easy to say. At least twice a week? Yes. This comes through the SARE? Yeah. Right. So just to know, and Cindy's saying she gets a couple of these a week. So, and anybody out here can get something like that. If you're on the leadership team, or anybody within the synagogue can get something like this from. And again, you look at the spelling on here, so things that are misspelled. But if it's asking for you to do something urgently, the rabbi would never ask you to go get a gift card. right? So you got to really think through some of these things, right? And if you have any questions, call Cindy, and we can talk through it. Now, when we send out stuff from the temple, we use Shul Cloud, and it has a certain template to it. So this is what anything that comes from the temple would look like, unless you're doing direct correspondence as part of the leadership team, or directly with one of our members, Sharon or Cindy or whatever from there. The one thing on this one, I know when I saw important message open immediately, okay, there is a sense of urgency there. So we've got to think through that whenever we do post these. But again, it got the message out so everybody knew what was going on. Okay, my personal specific examples. So I received 3 separate ransomware demands over about a 4-week period. Each request was virtually identical, with the exception of the Bitcoin wallet, the amount requested, and just slight variations in the text. When I went out and looked to see, my email had been part of 2 separate security breaches, privacy breaches the last couple of years. One was from Posh, which is now Poshmark. I didn't even remember I signed up for the site 10 years ago. So that's one of the things when I talk about digital footprint, when you really dig down and start thinking about it, you really got to dig back into your brain cells and remember what you've done. And then MyFitnessPal was the other one. So I've since gone out to both of those and completely eliminated all my material, but we found that MyFitnessPal, their breach data was available on the dark web for sale, which is where I think this came from. So let's look at these real quickly. This first one was and that's the only one I'm looking at there. So this is another one. It looks like they logged into my account, which I know they didn't after all the research that I did. They just spoofed my email address. So they got it from probably MyFitnessPal, spoofed my email address. So it's from me to me, priority high. And then you can look at that and say, got bad news to share. A few months ago, I got access to your system. Do you have any doubts? I can just click, click, click. She has no, he or she, I think it is a she on this one, no issue with making them publicly available. And let's settle it this way. Send me Bitcoin, and I'll delete all the stuff right away. Bitcoin wallet's right there. Here are the things you don't want to do. Don't reply to me. Don't reach out to the police. And I'm going to say that's the first thing you want to do is if you get an actual ransomware, you need to reach out. So don't try to find me. So all these things don't do, right? So that's one of the things that made it where it was very easy. I got 3 of these, like I say, it was one week, another one another week, and another one about 2 weeks later. All of them extremely similar. Just the headers, let's go back over here to this. So I went out and looked at the email header. You can see the from says from Cheryl Carmel, but you see next to it in the brackets says a different name. So, and that's digging into the source to find out where it came from. But I knew for a fact, because everything that they said that they had, I'm like, I don't do that stuff. I know I don't do that stuff. So it ain't on my system. So I dug into it to see what's there. And then I went through the reporting process to make sure it was reported to the authorities. So even though I didn't pay ransom was being demanded of me. That's what prompted me to pay. I mean, not to pay, to report, sorry. Yeah, so there's 2 sites, and I'll talk about those a little bit later on. So the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC has a site specifically for reporting these. And then there's the IC3, which is the Internet, oh shoot, I can't remember it now. It's basically Internet criminal reporting that the FBI manages. So there's 2 sites that I'll go through in just a few minutes just to make sure that we see those. Okay, real quickly, some other sites. I don't know how we're doing on time. I figured I was going to go along with this. This one was from Chase. It was a pretty well set up one. The one I wanted to show is this Federal Trade Commission. This one was really well done. This was several years ago. I was actually dealing with the FTC quite a bit at that time. So I got this and it was a complaint. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But I went back to look at it and I hovered over the links, right? So you hover over them without clicking. So the first link you see down below where I wrote this in, the first link was something else. The second link was something else. Only the third link was actually what it needed to be, the FTC. So that was spam. But had I not, it was so well written and so well crafted, and it was very timely, right? Emotion, accuse somebody like myself that I've got somebody complaining about me to the FTC. That's really going to get an emotional response from me to see what's going on. So pretty good that way. And then something like this is just so old and outdated. You don't need to worry about it. Hopefully nobody's falling for these anymore, right? So this is the message you really don't want to see and what we're trying to avoid at this point, right? Okay. Let's get into that common sense plan of what you need to do to be prepared for what you can't predict. So these are the steps. You got to prepare, have your eyes wide open. You got to protect. I call it defense is the best defense. Respond. Best thing I can come up with when the poop hits the propeller. Recover, make things shiny new, and then review. I call that minimalism. So lots of words on this slide here. So basically the first thing we want to do, and I'm taking my business hat and trying to convert it over to a consumer hat and make you really think through this. So we're going to do a risk assessment. Remember going back to all those data types and the device types? Think through all of those. And again, like I mentioned before, POSH was something I hadn't realized I was still on. You want to make sure you understand what data do I have of value? All that personal information, sensitive information, files, photos, whatever. Once you go through and start looking at this, your eyes will really be wide open to understand just how vast your data is. Like, medical information, how many different places. You've got your doctor, you got the hospitals you go to, you've got the labs you go to. There's just so many different places that this information is. So really get to know what your digital footprint is. So make that inventory. Email addresses, how many abandoned email addresses do you have? Some people, when you get to the point where you get so many spams, you'll abandon it. But unless you delete it, it's still going to be out there. Perform a threat assessment. And I first say, who would want my data? Well, cyber criminals want your data, so let's put that one to rest. But the next thing is thinking about what your online behavior is, right? Simple things. Do you do a lot of shopping online? And how do you manage that? Is there one credit card you would use online, or do you use multiples? What type of sites do you visit? Religious sites. I mean, these are anything that can make you a target. Religious sites, political sites, looking at the site where the woman opened her eyes during her own funeral, gambling sites, gaming sites, all of those. There's nothing really, bad necessarily about any of them, but just how many sites do you go to? What type of searching do you do? And what type of research do you do? Then you perform a vulnerability assessment. And how you do that, just start looking at what I currently do to protect my data. Do I have antivirus? Am I encrypting my systems? Do I have information on USB drives? Do I have a password protected on my phone? So just different things along those lines, just making sure you understand what your footprint is in that direction. And then once you have all that together, we're going to do a remediation plan. We're going to figure out what we need to fix. All right, so you got to think about your risk appetite as well. So if you're, again, let's look at the religion, you do research for different things within religion. That's your job here. That's what we do. So we know we're accepting the risk of looking at Jewish sites. But if there's other sites that you're looking at that, well, that's just a curiosity every once in a while. Maybe I won't look at that on this device, whatever, just to try to minimize my footprint. So coming back to, you got to know what you got, where you got it in order to get it protected. Right? So now that you got your plan here, defense. So let's go into a defensive mode. Go back and review what you've got and let's start making some changes. The first thing I'll say is, unless you're really comfortable doing your own IT, hire somebody to do it for you, right? Now, some things you can do yourself, some things you can get advice on, but others you want to make sure you've got a good IT resource at your fingertips to be able to use them. Other things we want to do, use reputable vendors, change your default passwords. Anytime you get a device, there's going to be a password, make a change to it. Update your security and privacy profile settings, encrypt whenever you possibly can. Those are my grassroots things that I want to see everybody doing as much as possible. Things within your network, password protect all your Wi-Fi access. Okay, and if you can, set up a guest Wi-Fi so that they can have their own access and not yours. Don't display your SSID. I can go into my daughter's neighborhood where I live. There's not that many people around, so I can go into my daughter's neighborhood and I've got at least 50 different people around that have open Wi-Fi. And I can connect to several of them because their passwords are pretty doggone simple. And so it's just a matter of checking that out and say, Set encryption on your Wi-Fi, at least WPA. Another one is don't auto-connect to public Wi-Fis. Remember the story about Dark Horse and how Dark Hotel, rather, they have that. So if you go into a Starbucks and it automatically joins, do you know you're joining the actual one, or is this a fake system that's set up? So application security, next layer that's there. I will always say, if you installed something, you want to make sure you keep it up to date. Now, a lot of people say, I want to stay a couple of them behind, make sure that they get up to date. That's fine, as long as you know what you're doing. That's one of your things that you have to understand your risks. Next one, if you didn't go up looking for it, ignore it. Those pop-ups that say, update me now. I had somebody who said, Norton just came up and said I needed an update. And I'm like, aren't you using McAfee? So you got to really think through some of this stuff that's there. Another one is, if it's too old for the vendor to support it, you really need to stop using it. So I know we have some situations like that here at the synagogue, and I know there's a financial constraint, but we really need to be very well aware of what's going on with these older systems. Antivirus, anti-malware is an absolute must. It's not going to catch everything, but it's going to catch more than you think. A password manager is something else I strongly suggest. I mean, I have no idea how many passwords everybody else has. I've got about 300 that I deal with on a regular basis, right? And if you can let it choose the password for you, so let it auto-generate, creates it very complex. That means you need to use that. And there's certain techniques within those password managers that will autofill for you. I'm not a fan of that. Again, it's very convenient. Browsers have an autofill for you as well. I'm not a fan of that, but I know it's very convenient. So just keep those things in mind as far as your risk and your risk appetite for that. Data safety. I say delete data that you don't need. So think through that. If you've got accounts out there, subscriptions that you're not using, if you don't need that data, get rid of it. If you don't need those accounts, get rid of them. Strong and unique passwords. So I'm going to just say with the password manager, if you use that, it's going to guarantee that. Anytime you can use multi-factor, use it. And when you do backups, make sure you back up offline and then plug it from your system so that you've got a good system that would not be impacted with a ransomware type of attack. Be clickophobic and linkophobic. If I can instill into you that, don't click unless you know exactly what you're clicking on. All right, and this is the cool one there. So proper planning prevents piss poor performance. Was too long to put up there, so I thought when poop hits the propeller, it's a little bit easier and at least get a little chuckle. So you get to that situation, so you've done all this planning, now you actually have an event. What do you do? And this is not one of those where I'm going to tell you step by step what to do on the keyboard. I am not going to tell you how to do that part. What I'm going to tell you is to sit back, review the situation, and activate what's called your incident response plan. When I got those ransomware demands, I was like, obviously, first thing I'm doing is, oh my God. And then I'm thinking, oh, wait, let me read here. And I'm saying what they're saying can't possibly be true. So what do I do? So I have steps that I go through. I pulled the headers from there, so I had some evidence. I made copies of, screenshot copies of the information that's there. So I had something to report. I ran my antivirus. I have an alternate antivirus that I run. So a couple of things like that that I will automatically do. But if you have any kind of concerns about this, make sure you use your IT resource. So within the synagogue, we have Ira Shapira is our IT contact. So our staff and leadership, if something happens with anything that we're dealing with, you contact Ira immediately and you do whatever he says. For the congregants, like when we did get that email coming out from the bookkeeper last November, if you're a congregant and you get something that looks fishy, contact one of the leadership teams, your staff or leadership team. They will take the information and take it to Ira and then see what to do next steps. That's our incident management plan for the synagogue. Very simple, nothing complex about it. Just make sure you do something as soon as you can. So going on from there, know the steps you need to follow if you receive a spam, scam, or scareware email. So what are you going to do? Are you going to try to handle it, or are you going to contact your IT folks? Know the steps to follow if you receive a message that you have a virus or ransomware. You can easily use your own virus checking software to check that to see if there's anything out there. They're very good about quarantining. So use whatever's there. If you feel uncomfortable, contact your IT resource. Reporting to authorities is key in my mindset to make sure that we're doing whatever we can. So again, I said ftc.gov and then ic3.gov. That's the Internet Crime Compliance Center, Complaint Center. So that's the IC3, part of FBI. All right. Also on the ftc.gov website, there's a lot of different documents that they have on how to handle different things. So it's like one pagers, like the one pager that we'll be sending out about the social engineering red flags. All right. Shiny news. So once the crisis has passed, let's sit back. And if you have to go out and rebuild and renew or refresh your system, this is bringing it back to that shiny new state. So you'll have to restore something from backup, perhaps rebuild from scratch. You may have to go out and buy something new because what you got is too old. They can't be updated anymore. So always want to have some kind of a backup plan. And then minimalism. So after all that's done, it's time to review your risk assessment, sit back and rethink your needs for stuff. So do you need all of the data, all the apps? One thing I think about is a calculator app that I downloaded a couple of years ago. Wanted access to my contacts, my microphone, and my photos, my camera. Why would a calculator need that? So you have the rights to say no to those things and not let it access. So only ask for data that you need when you're doing things and only give data that you know they need. Another one, there was I was trying to buy a gift card with cash and the company I was trying to buy that gift card from would not sell it to me unless I gave them my email address. You don't need my email address, I'm paying cash. So they wouldn't sell it, so I walked out. Also, one of the things with my business side is know the supplier of your suppliers. So who has your contact information in their contact list? And what happens if they get hit with something? One thing that happened here in just this last couple of weeks is now that I've got a granddaughter that's in school, and other people may know about this, is like, because you've got kids in school. My daughter was told if you give up so many email addresses, then Josephine will get an extra prize. And then whoever donates, she'll get more prizes. So there goes my email address. Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting all these emails from this company asking for a donation. Like, okay, so I didn't consent to my email going. Again, I understand my daughter doing it, but I didn't consent. How many other times is that happening that you don't know? So there's things that you may never know about. But as long as you are conscious of how many places your email or phone number can be shared, you'll get it there. So know your ops. Where can you opt out? Where do you have to give the information? All right. So that's pretty much it. And we'll go there for contact and then on to, I'll let this roll for a while. So any questions from anybody online?
I have a comment.
Okay.
So
That one's funny. Come on, laugh.
anyone?
Okay, you're on mute.
Cheryl?
Go ahead.
Cheryl? Hi, it's Faye. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. This has been really helpful, but I do have a question. I
Sure.
have my photos and I thought they were secure. And then one of my Facebook friends apparently was able to get on it and she started posting them like, oh, look how nice Faye looks. Look how nice Gaylord looks in his uniform. Is there some way that I can keep my Facebook friends from sharing my photos?
Wow, that's a good one. I'll have to think through some of that there. But so Faye, maybe we can offline and talk about that. But I'm sure
Okay,
there is a setting in Facebook that,
okay,
that can eliminate that kind of sharing without you knowing about it. That's,
okay,
yeah, so Cindy
Okay.
just put two things there is.
okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, we'll see what we can find out. And then I do want to go back and all the information that was get there, I'll get that into a document so that you guys can see it and really think about it. Okay.
I wanted to add, if you get any kind of malware or whatever that's related to being Jewish, Secure Community Network
Okay.
is the organization that can help you.
Okay. Secure Community Network. Is that a website?
So strangely enough, it's easy, you can just Google it, but their website is in plural, so it's Secure Community Networks. .org.
Okay. So that's something to think about.
But they work very closely with ADL.
Yep.
And
You saying that works plural?
I don't really understand the relationship, but they're very tightly related.
Okay, that's good to know. Good to know.
Hey, Cheryl, this is Ira.
Hey, Ira.
Hi, how are you? First, I just want to say that this was fantastic. Even though I'm in the trenches every day, I heard some things that I never heard before. So thank you for putting it together. Are you able to do a screen share for a sec?
Or you want to do a screen share?
I do. If you can turn that on, it's
Yep.
disabled.
In that part. And, all right. I gotta get back over here to this. And of course there. Oh, stop share is right there. There it is. Okay.
All right,
There you
so, okay, so, well, okay, I guess I don't know if anybody can see it, but I just, I'm aiming my camera at something and I don't know if it's,
We're seeing your Zoom screen.
yeah, well, it's not coming up. Anyway, I just wanted everybody to know that even our cyber expert can steal material because I'm wearing the T-shirt that has the Moses in the cloud data.
Oh, really? That's good. Boy, I just seen that one this past week. That was pretty funny.
Anyway, the only thing I would want to add that's very basic and common misconceptions that I find among people all the time is if you're a Mac user, don't be thumbing your nose at other computer type users and and telling them that that you can't get a virus because you have a Mac. That's not true.
That's not,
And and you need to have the same kind of protection and awareness using your Mac as everybody else.
and actually recently it's gotten even more so. So there's more Mac users now than there were years ago.
And that's exactly why.
Yep. Yep. And so there's somebody on the session tonight that's TBA Zoom?
Yeah.
Is that not you or you?
It's not us.
Okay,
So
so,
we can email the presentation.
right, but
but
we
I
just,
don't know who to
who that
email
is.
it to.
Okay,
So who is TBA Zoom?
so if you know that you're TVA Zoom, just let us know so we can know who to email some information out to. And other questions? All right, so who's ready to get online on every device tonight and like,
Yeah.
want to go wipe your screen off real quick? Make sure it's clean. They'll do anything they can to make money, right? So there we have it. All right. Okay, and I am very impressed that I actually taught Ira something. I'm very thrilled.
And here's the shirt.
Oh, there you go.
A friend
Awesome.
on Facebook from somebody.
Very good.
Actually, that shirt came from a synagogue in it was either Belgium or Brussels. Matt, my brother Matt, was on a business trip and visited. This is supposedly one of the biggest synagogues in Europe, and they had these T-shirts in the gift shop. So he brought them back for the whole family.
Oh, that's great.
I just
Awesome.
friends with both of them.
I get it from like Jesus.
So feel free to reach out to me at any time if you just want to learn something else or if you have any other direct questions.
Oh,
And
that's
otherwise,
different.
thank you guys very much.
Oh, that means that
All right.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome. Good night.
people you may know,
Yeah.
don't do any of that. I get 25